I created loading screens for Excel VBA, and here's how I did it and how you can integrate it into your projects. When building automation tools in VBA, I noticed that it isn't the fastest programming language. Sometimes, when it was processing a lot of records, it would take several minutes for the tool to complete its task. Since VBA doesn't have any built-in loading screens, I had to make my own because I wanted to give the front-end user the best experience possible when using my tools. In this video, we're going to go over how you can just use the ones I've already made, or if you want to create your own, I can show you how to do that as well. After we've learned how to create them, we're going to learn how to integrate them into your subroutines so that they show up while your code is running. All right, let's jump right into how to use the ones that I've already created. So you will have to navigate to my website, stevenexcels.com. This is the home page, and up in the top right, you'll see 4 tabs. You want to click on My Work, and right now it is the top one, VBA loading screens. You want to click here or on the picture. You'll see right at the top, get your copy here. This is a button, VBA loading screens. This will download a zip file and will contain the user forms that I've already created and the ones that you'll be seeing in this video. Once you've downloaded and extracted the files from that zip file, you should see something like this. There will be 2 files per user forum. So for example, %0. You can see there's an FRM and there is an FRX. Don't worry about this because when you choose to import it, it will only show one of these types. So you'll only have to select one of them. We'll do that now. So you can see over here on the left, I already have all of these in my workbook because I created them here. But you'll probably have no forms over here. So what you want to do is right click and import file. You'll navigate to the folder where these are saved, and you can see it's only showing the FRM file, and we have one of each. So we have 0, 10, 20, etc. So unfortunately, I don't think you can do this as a mass import. You cannot. You'll have to do these one by one. So you just click on the one you want and click open, and it will come into the form section here, and it should look like this. If you've downloaded the ones that I've created and you just want to learn how they integrate into projects and how to put them into your scripts, skip to the timestamp on screen. If you downloaded these and also want to know how to create your own like this, but how to modify them and the important things about these so that they can run with your code, then keep watching right now. So right now we're going to create a new user form. So we're going to hit Insert, User Form, and you can see it's blank and it's a different size. And we notice there's a title up here. When you look at mine, there is no title here. So we are going to go here and it says User Form 1. So first off, we're going to talk about modifying this so you know what it's called. We're going to change its name here in the Forms section on the left of the screen. So you want to click on it, and Properties down here on the bottom left, you'll see User Form 1. That is the name showing up on the left-hand side. If you don't see this, hit View, Properties window. It'll pop up. So when you change this to New User Form Name, you can see it pops right up to the top and the name is now updated. So change that to whatever you want it to be. Then you'll notice User Form 1 is in the top left hand of this user form. Usually we want to just delete that unless you want a title to present to the front end user. I typically delete these. So again, we'll go down to the Properties window. We're going to drag this up. And we'll see Caption, User Form 1. That is this title in the top left. So we are going to delete that. Something important to note is when we do use this in our code and we call it to either show it or get rid of it, this name here in the form section is the name of the variable we will be interacting with. So new user form name, that's what we would call. in the examples I'm going to show later in the video, I'm going to be using these. So %_0, that's the variable name, and VBA knows I'm talking about this user form. All right, so a few things to adjust this. You might want it to be a certain size. So we're going to do this. In the properties window, height, you can change this to whatever you want. 180 right now, we could change it to 400. We can put 400 in the height column, and you'll see the height is adjusted. And further down, second from the bottom, we have width. So again, we can put whatever, 500, and the user form will move accordingly. You saw on mine that I had a background. It wasn't just white. If we look at this, you can preview your user form anytime you like by hitting the play button, and it will show you what it looks like on screen. You can see mine, the ones that I created, weren't just white. They had a background. And how you do that is you find a background online. And then over here in the properties window, you'll see picture. Right now it says none. You'll hit the 3 dots, navigate to your picture, choose the picture you would like. 2 rows below the picture, you should see something like bitmap. And 2 rows below that, you'll see picture size mode. It's a drop down, and I put stretch. And that should put the entire picture in the frame of the user form. Adding a picture can just make it a little bit more professional, make it look a little bit better, and it's pretty easy to do. Next, we're going to talk about text and text boxes. When adding text and text boxes to this, you should have this little toolbox, this little floating window. And if you don't see this, it's this little toolbox next to the question mark at the top. So what you want to do is click the A over here and then drag, and this will allow you to type. If you double click this, it'll bring you into writing code, which we don't want to do. So we'll get rid of that, and we'll click back on the name on the left. What you want to do is click and then click again slowly. So double click, but slowly. Then you'll be able to edit the text in here. So title. Next, there's a couple things we want to review. That this is very small and it doesn't blend in with our background. It has a background itself. We can fix that by going to the properties window on the left. Make sure the text box is selected. And we can also change this name. And this will change the variable name that we interact with in the code. So this is important. Label 1 is not very descriptive. So you want to change it to something more descriptive so that when you're writing your code, it makes more sense. We'll say title for user form. Now when we refer to it in our code, that's what we're going to write. So to change the font and the size, we're going to go to the font section here, click the 3 dots, and we should have a pop-up window. Change what it looks like, font, if it's bold, italic, and the size over here. You can see how it changed. Change that to whatever you want it to be. And then in order to get rid of this background, we'll go up here to backstyle. You can see it says backstyle opaque. Drop down and click backstyle transparent. Now it will blend in with the rest of our user form. And lastly, the most important thing when you're creating your own user forms that you want to use as loading screens is the modal. It needs to be set to false. Again, in the properties window, near the bottom, you will see show modal. This says true right now. We do not want that to be the case. True is the default, so this always needs to be changed. Change that to false. What this does is if the code is running and we write a line of code to show this user form, and that is set to true as it is default, the code will stop running until the user acknowledges and closes the user form. That is not what we want. We want it to pop up, display information to the user, and then the code should continue to run in the background. if we set it to false, show modal equals false, that's exactly what it will do. It will show it, display the information we tell it to, and then it will continue to run. And it will only close when we tell it to close. That's what we need for loading screens. Customize this all you like, change the size, change the fonts, play around with it, and we will be moving on to the code itself. How do we call these so that they pop up while the code is running? All right, for this example, we are going to be using the percentage 0 and percentage 10 as if we just started running our code. So this one will show up starting now, 0% complete. And then whenever you, let's say you have 100,000 records, as soon as it hits 10,000 records, we want 10% to show up, right? I'm going to show you how to initially display the starting 0% and then how to close that one and how to display the processing 10% once we hit a desired amount. So here we have our percentage subroutine, and this is very simple. We have a subroutine right here that calls %0. Make sure you're not labeling this, or the user form itself the same thing. You can see this is %0. This is %0. And this is percentage. If any of these are exactly the same, VBA will say it's ambiguous, meaning there's more than one and we are expecting one value. So the first thing we're doing in the subroutine is displaying the 0% starting now user form. So let's take a look inside this and see what it's doing. Right here we have private sub %0, and we are calling %0, the user form name on the left, dot show. So that's going to bring it up. %0 dot repaint. This is important if you have screen updates off, which for the tools that I write, I always turn it off because it increases efficiency. So what this line is doing is this is positioning the user form where you want on the screen. Application top means it's going to be at the top of the Excel window, and application left means it's going to be to the left. So if we left it the way it is now without the numbers at the end, it would display in the top left part of the screen. So we can show that by running this, and it will stop. So this should be on the Excel window, and we can see it's displayed in the far top left. Now we don't want it to stay there. We want to move it over and we want to move it down. That's why when we add the plus 250 and plus 575, it moves it to the middle and then down to the middle. So we'll show that now. So again, we've added the numbers and we'll run it. We'll just show our Excel window, and you can see it's basically in the middle. If you want to move it down or up or over, you just adjust the numbers however you like. So that is how you bring the window up and how you put it where you want it. It's very important that you use these two lines because it will just try to put it in the center. But if there's multiple screens, 2 or 3 screens, it could put it somewhere you're not expecting. So using this will always center it on the Excel application that it's in, which is what we want. So now let's say we show this, and we go back up to our code. So we call this, we pop up the starting window, and now there's a bunch of code right here where stuff is happening, maybe a for loop, who knows. You process 10% of the records, and now we want to call the 10% progress. What we would do is we would go here, and it's right below %0, %10, unload percentage 0 is the first thing we do. Now that is closing out the starting one that we just brought up because we no longer need to see it. So we're going to close that one. Then we're going to do the same 4 things as we did here. We're going to show, repaint, and center it on the application screen. That's it. And for the rest, 20, 30, 40, etc., this will be the same. We will close the previous and we will show the new. You can see right here, update this based on the form that's currently showing. So you can use these in different ways. You can just use 20, 40, 60, 25, 50, 75. You can use these however you like. I did 10 through 100 because I thought it would look better slowly going up with a little progress bar. You can do this however you like. Just make sure you update which one's being closed and which ones are being opened. Now that we understand how the percentage one works, we're going to look at the other 2 examples because something that the percentage is lacking is it's just showing. And the user form itself is changing. But what about something like this, where we have total records, and the total records, depending on what's being validated or processed, is going to change every single time we use it. That means this needs to be a variable value in the code itself. So this is what the user form looks like, and the value is being placed there by the code. Same with processed. Once we hit 10,000, 20,000 in our for loop, the code needs to put it into this text box. So now we'll look at how we do that. You can see we're in the mod records module over here, and we have 2 global variables, total records and process records. Now, typically we're going to get total records by counting the records in an Excel or CSV file. But for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to hard code 1 million as our total records value. Now this should never change. We count all the records. That should be forever the same. We could put this as a global constant as well, but here I just put it as a variable and a global variable. For our process records, we start at 0 because obviously at the beginning, 0 have been processed. So we will start by calling record start. Now this is going to be the same as the percentage. It's going to be bringing up records starting, which is starting 0 processed. 0 is hard written into this user form because when you start, 0 have always been processed. But we still need the total records. So let's dive into this subroutine and see what it says. Private sub records start. So here we're calling the user form records underscore starting. You can see that right over here. That is the user form name. So that is the variable name we're referring to. Dot total records box. This is a part of the user form. So let's go back to the user form. Records starting, total records box. Make sure this box is clicked on. And you can see the name over here, total records box. That means we're referring to this box. Go back to the code. What do we want this to equal? We want it to equal our total records variable that was found earlier in the code. So let's say this was a count from an Excel sheet, and this was the value given to this variable. We now take this variable, we pass it into this box to display to the user. And we want to format it so it shows with commas, because if we have a million, it's just going to show as a million with no commas, and it's not as easy to read. So using this format total records, and we want it formatted this way, make sure to put these in parentheses. That will put commas where they should be for large numbers. So after we put that value in the box, we then do the same thing as before. We call the user form, we show it, repaint, and use the same exact position for the user form. So everything else is exactly the same. We're just assigning a value to that box. So it will say 0 and 1 million. We can do that by running the code and looking at it. So we'll stop here and we'll run this and pull up Excel. You can see it's in the middle. It has 0, which is hard coded, and then we have total records 1 million with commas, which was passed to a variable, which we then passed to this box. So after we put up this starting user form telling people that's starting and 0 have been processed, your code would go here. This is just placeholder saying wait 2 seconds and then update the process records from 0 up here to something here. Let's say there's a for loop or whatever, and you could say if process records equals 100,000, do this, and it would show update records progress. We just call this. So whenever we hit an increment we want to display 0 to something to make progress, we'll then call this, and we will see it's exactly the same. The only thing we did was, again, we put in the total records, we formatted it with commas, total records box, and then this time we also called the user form and updated the processed box, which is the one which was hard coded during the starting, and now the in progress is empty because we need to put a variable number there. So it's exactly the same as the line above, except the variable is process records instead of total, and the box is processed box instead of total. After that, we have to unload the previous user form, the records underscore starting, because we want to close that out, and then open the records in progress. We want to show it, repaint, top left, same as before. So it'll show up exactly where the one was before. So we will run this. We'll stop it here. So it'll set our variables. It will bring up the first user form. Excel will wait 2 seconds. That's what this line means. This is how long it will pause before continuing to running the code. It will update this variable value, and then we will display the updates to the user. So let's run this. Let's do it by hitting this button. We have starting 0. Okay. And then we hit processing, 100,000 processed out of 1 million. Now it's stopped right now because we put a breakpoint right here. So we're just going to close this. And in this situation, you can see we only have 3: starting, in progress, finished. Every time we want to make an update to the process records, we just need to call it again. So you can see here was our first time we updated it. We waited 2 seconds, updated to 100,000, and then we called it, which we just saw. So it displayed 100,000 records processed. After that, the code continues to run. We wait another 2 seconds, and our process records equals 500,000. So now we need to update it again on the front end for the user. So we're going to call the same exact code, records progress. This is the same one we just looked at. So it's going to update. And since we always use a variable, as long as that variable is updated in your code, you never have to change the value here. We're going to unload record starting, even though record starting was already closed. It's no longer open. So even though it's closed, it will not cause an error, which is good. You can leave it, because if it is open, it will close it. If it isn't open, it will just continue. So there's no reason to leave this, to remove this. And then we will show, it's already showing But if it's not, let's say this one's currently there, this has to be there. So since it's already showing, it will basically skip this part, and then repaint is what does the update. It updates, repaint and update, almost the same thing. And then it will ensure the position is the same. So every time you update the variable and you want to display that to the user, you would just call records progress every single time. See, we do it again here, records progress once we hit 750. So now we can, let's do this, and we'll run this, and you can see there is a difference. From when it goes starting to process the first time, you'll see a flash as if one closed and one opened. But then when 100,000 updates to 500,000 and 500,000 updates to 750,000, you can see there is no flash. Just the numbers are updating because it's being repainted or updated. You'll see a flash there, and then 500, no flash. 750, no flash. Hard to see because this window opens. And then once we hit our, you could have a if statement here saying if process rows equals total rows, then call records finish. So that's going to be our last screen. We'll go here. Exactly the same layout with different variables. So records finished instead of records processed. Total records, process records, same exact thing. Unload records in progress, and then show records finished, repaint, and position it correctly. Very simple. So now we can watch it all go at once. 100, 500, 750, and 1 million. You can see here it says complete. So now something you need to notice is we get rid of these user forms, let's say the in progress one, by hitting unload progress. We'll go back to it right here, unload records in progress. This automatically closes the user form, so the user doesn't get a chance to close it themselves. Once we hit records finish, it's important to note we do not unload records finished. That way, if they step away from the computer and they come back, this will remain here on screen until they acknowledge it by clicking the X. So that subroutine should be called at the very end when screen updating and everything has already been turned back on, and that should be your last subroutine. So when it finishes, no more code needs to execute, and it's sitting there waiting for the user to acknowledge and click the X button. And last but not least, we will go over the validation. So let's run it, and then we'll step into the code. You can see this is a validation screen showing, let's say, a testing. You're trying to test code or a spreadsheet that you've uploaded into the tool, and you want it to meet specific criteria. You can have stage 1 criteria, stage 2, and so on. In this example, we have 3, and we can present to the user, stage 1 is running, and it passed. Stage 2 is running, and it failed, etc. So this is another way you can do it, and this only requires one user form. So we'll acknowledge, we'll step into the code. You can see here on the left side, the validation is just one user form. So we'll open it up, and it just looks like this. So we will step into the code interacting with it. Just like the other two, first thing we do is validation start. And we have 3 global variables: stage 1 result, stage 2 result, stage 3 result. We'll step into starting. It's going to look very similar to the other ones we've done. Validation dot stage 1 value. Now again, validation is our user form. Stage 1 value is our text box for stage 1. You can see that over here. Stage 1 value in the property window. Back to the code. What do we want that to say? We want it to say running. Okay, that means stage 1 is currently running. And we put that at the beginning because here would be all the code where you're actually doing the validation. You're writing the code, to check for whatever conditions you're looking for. And you have a variable such as stage 1 result right here that is given a value failed or passed or good or bad or whatever you want it to be. In this example, this is just taking the place of code that normally would be here, and then we are passing a passed value to the variable. So once we do that, we will stop the code here, and we will show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like. We'll minimize this. This is what validation_start did. All it did was it took the form and it put this value in this box. That's all. After we open the user form and display that it's running, we then need to update stage 1 after stage 1 has been given a result. So once we get our stage 1 result, we put in call validation stage 1 update. We'll look at this. We're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to update the text box stage 1 value to stage 1 result. Whatever was given in the code that you wrote above is going to be here in the variable, and it will be displayed in this text box on the user form. Also, while we're updating stage 1, since it has a result, we know it's done, we can update stage 2 to say that now stage 2 is currently running. You could also, if this evaluated to fail, you could say if stage 1 value equals fail, stop the code. You could do that as well. You would type end, E-N-D. That would stop execution of any code. But if you want to continue, because the validations are not dependent, then you could just continue, say stage 2 is running, repaint the user form, and then make sure it's in the correct position. So we'll see that happen here. We'll update stage 1, and then we will wait here. Running, passed, running, stop. Should say running. Perfect. Now we're going to update stage 2 and stage 3. So validation stage 2 update, we're going to do the same exact thing. Validation stage 2 value equals stage 2 result, stage 3 value equals running. Repaint, and then the position, the same as always. Once we do the stage 2 update, we will run some more code. We will see if stage 3 passed or failed. We will get a value into our variable, and then we will call validation stage 3 update. We will do stage 3 value equals stage 3 result. Notice there is no more running because that was our last validation. If you decided to expand and you had 5 stages or 10 stages, then obviously you would continue and say stage 4 value equals running, etc. Repaint, position, and there is no unload validation because we don't want it to close. We want, when this is done running, we want to leave the validation results up on the screen so that the user can see them and then acknowledge and move on. So let's run this all the way through. Running, passed, running, failed, running, passed. And it doesn't do anything. The code is done. Everything's done running, but the screen stays the way it is. That way, if I walked away, I got a coffee, came back, I know exactly what went wrong. I can acknowledge and continue my work. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did get any value out of this, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions about this project or another VBA project, feel free to reach out to me directly via my website contact page.